It's Wednesday morning. You have to say Wednesday or Wednesday. It's hard to say it correctly. Um, it's easy to say it incorrectly, Wednesday with the ND, but it's not. It's DN, so Wednesday. But you've heard that rant before, so I won't repeat it. Or maybe I will later. You never know. So why not? Why not have relaxing painting and miscellaneous stuff with the Apollo with Dyson Dungeons, and that's what is going to happen. I'm working on the command module, the last piece of the Apollo model, and I've got pretty much just weird little odds and ends left to do, and then one big thing, and I'm not sure when I'm going to get her, how that's going to go, but as I usually do, I'll just do a preview. Okay. Under here is an easy part, I hope. These are like the nose cone parts of the command module, and they've been spray painted that lovely pearlescent white, and so they are ready to be unmasked. Okay. And I'll probably do that sooner than later because it's a low risk sort of thing, and that's a good thing to start with. And then I've got the component that holds the parachutes, and the painting instructions for this are really unhelpful. It says painted brown. I will paint the shrouds of the three main chutes brown. And one of the techniques we've used for minifigs, which has worked really pretty well, is to use, it's called leather brown, which when painted on does not look like leather at all, but when washed with a brown wash does look leathery. So I think I'm going to do that. The alternative would be to use the same sort of technique I used on the dungeon tiles that look like wood, which is to paint it brown. And then use a smoky ink wash, which is a little bit reddish, which is a really nice color, but I don't think that's what this is supposed to be like. And then there's weird little things like shroud lines, parachute cords, basically, that I want to paint a different color. And I'll do that before I do the wash. And then there are components, little bits of things here that I think are supposed to represent the mortars that pop the parachute out, that shoot it out on each of them. And then these two here, I believe, are supposed to be the pilot and the drogue chutes. And there's these little things down here look pretty much like these things. So I think those are the mortars. I'm going to paint the mortars red because, explosives, you paint them red so that people are careful about it. And then these other components here, I'm either going to paint a darker metallic color or maybe even flat black. I'm not really sure. The background to all of this, I think I'm just going to be painting kind of a light metallic. Maybe I'll use chainmail silver on it. I'm not going to use a really bright silver. Anyway, I'm going to try to make this look like something other than just brown. The top of this is supposed to be the airlock and hatch that goes between the command module and the lunar module. And for whatever reason, the paint that went on there just got all swirly looking. It's like the pigment didn't get mixed in right, so I'm going to repaint that with the Duraluminum color. I'll probably wait for that until later on in the stream after I paint some of the other detail, because a lot of this is also painted the Duraluminum color, and if the brown paint or the red paint or the whatever paint I use gets down onto it, then I'll be using that as a touch-up, and I might as well wait, because there'll be some touch-up, I might as well wait to paint this when I pull that color out for this. Then in this box that you can't see yet, but I'm bringing over, this is the box of mostly done and undone things. This is a done thing. This is the floor of the command module. These are all parts of the instrument panels, and they need to be prepped. Okay, they just have extra little bits of plastic on them, like flashings, and where they were attached to the sprue and that sort of thing. So that's just some sanding that I will do, and then I'm going to do some test fitting because the couch with the astronauts, I'll take it out, doesn't always fit very well, and this component here, which goes over their faces, I still, after 4 or 5 tries, have failed to figure out how it's supposed to attach. Okay, and then the delicate thing for today is to attach the window to the door. And that's going to be delicate because I don't want to smudge it up. So I've got this stuff that's called well, it claims to be the world's best canopy cement, but I guess that's just in their advertising. It's just for cementing clear parts. And it also dries clear. It's kind of like liquid water or realistic water. But what I need to do somehow, and I'm going to practice this, is I need to get the cement around it and then put the window on just exactly in place with hardly any movement at all. Because if I have an adhesive on there and I put this on and I have to move it around, the adhesive is going to just stick to the window and blur it. So I don't know. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that. Thinking I might try this technique. And I get it to stick to my finger, and then I very, very carefully bring it down to where it's supposed to be, and then it's supposed to stick there. Maybe. Anyway, I'm going to do that a little bit later in the stream after I've had some coffee and this is my sticky tack hold for parts that I might actually end up using for this, like that, rather than holding it with my fingers. Just stick it on there now, why not? Has a magnet in the base, and it grabbed the file and a pair of tweezers, and it knocked my brushes all around. That being the kind of thing it's being today. I wonder if this will work. But the other thing, other than grabbing it, wet finger, I was thinking if I grab it with a tweezers like this, but I'm going to do this over a box, by the way, when I do this, because I was trying to make a second one. See, this gives me a lot more precision if I don't drop it. See, that would have been a disaster. And that would have been pretty close to being okay. So I'll leave that in here. I might end up using that. Okay, so some unmasking, then these will be done, and they'll go in the done box here. Done, done, done. Can you see the done box? Probably not. There's the done box. This is in the done box because I want it in the box. So what I was saying is I was making a second one of those windows, like a backup window or maybe even an improvement. And I was here and it slipped out of my hands and it's on the floor somewhere and has never been found. Which happens when things fall like that. And it's clear and it's tiny and it disappeared. So I don't want to lose that because I don't want to try to make like 3 or 4 more before I get one that looks anywhere close to that. So these are on a little piece of cardboard. I taped them down so that when I sprayed them, they didn't fly around. So I'm going to have coffee and not do anything for a minute. Oh yeah, one other little bit. I'll deal with that later. I was using some plastic filler to fill in a gap here in the command module, and I'll explain why that's there a little bit later in the stream, if I remember. So let me take this off. It is now off of the cardboard, and then I'll put the tape over to the side. So I had masked this so that the white paint didn't get on the gray-green paint. Okay, so the outside of this, the inside of this Apollo, several places, like inside the service module and inside the fairing newels, the LEM, is painted this sort of gray-green color. And the same is true of this. These little toothpicks here kept paint from getting into these holes, and those holes are where the little base bits of the escape tower go. And I didn't want paint to get in there because the fit is pretty tight. And if paint got in there, then it wouldn't fit anymore. And if it didn't fit anymore, then there would be there. Then that would be a problem, right? Right. There, I have successfully removed masking tape from a thing I painted. And then this goes on here like that. And this whole thing then sits on top of the command module. And then the parachutes thing, I'll show you how that works. This is a shroud that covers it during launch. After it is safely in orbit, this is actually jettisoned. Well, actually, that's not true. I told a lie about how this works. This after safe launch, this is jettisoned. Okay. Because it's not only is it not needed any longer, but it's in the way. Because what this does is it goes like this, so this covers the capsule when it's launched. And then after it's safely in orbit, this and the escape tower is jettisoned because it isn't needed anymore. Then this comes off, and this goes in the done box. This comes off, revealing the hatch, the airlock and hatch, so that the lunar module can dock with this. Okay, but this stays on until it's ready to come back to Earth after it returns from the moon, and it's about to re-enter the atmosphere. The service module is jettisoned, and this is jettisoned, revealing the parachutes, which are going to be important. You don't want that thing still on there when the parachutes are supposed to be launched, do you? No, you don't. If you were an astronaut, you definitely don't. So those don't look like much, and that's what they are. And they don't actually get cemented on either. Because they come off so that you can simulate the entire Apollo mission. And if I have extra time, and I mind this session because there isn't too much to do. I shouldn't say that. There isn't that much to do, but sometimes it just takes forever because there's oopses in the way. Or this might take forever to paint. I'm not quite ready to attach the window yet. I think I am going to do, excuse me, I just have a lot of drainage lately. There's a weather front that came through, and the cold front, and it brought down a whole lot of allergens from another place. So these control panels, I've talked about these before, but I'll just mention again. This could end up just delaying the final construction of this quite a while because the control panels here, if you look, have a very, very lightly embossed representation of what the panel might look like. The real control panel is extremely complicated. It looks like this. And when our DM and I were looking at this and said, you know, what they really should have done was given us decals that represented the way it really looks. We could put a decal on here, and then when you look through the hatch of the command module, you could see that, and they didn't. Okay, so it was, well, maybe I'll try to paint it. And as you can see, painting that on this scale would be very challenging. I'm not saying it's impossible. For me, it probably is impossible. For other people, it might not be impossible. The representation of the control panel is not terribly accurate. Okay, I can say that with great confidence, that the embossing that's put on these control panel bits, and even their shape, don't really match the real thing. What to make of that, I'm not sure. But it's like the rest of the model, you know, where it's sort of an impression of what it was supposed to look like rather than an accurate representation. What you're going to try to do is to take a picture like this, which is a picture of the control panel, and sort of Photoshop it, you know, edit the edges, get the size right, and take like this, you know, like this part here, and attempt to get it to the right size and shape, and then apply it with, I don't know, maybe rubber cement or something like that. Apply it like it were as though it were a decal, even though it's not. Yeah, I mean, why not? Why not give that a try? But we haven't started the process yet, so I'm not sure how long it's going to take to get around to doing it, and whether it'll even be successful or not, I don't know. So, you know, like this one goes here. What I can do, though, in the interim is get these pieces prepped so that they fit. And then I can paint them. I'll prime them, and they get painted the same light blue color. And then the applique, I'll call it that, of the control panel will then go on after they've been painted. just to give you an idea of how this is supposed to work and how the parts don't really fit very well. They go in like this and they're supposed to wrap around. Okay. And then you look in. These are supposed to be cemented in first. Yeah, they just don't fit very well. The fit and finish on this model leaves a huge thing to be desired. Dump the astronauts out. After this is all put together, this is supposed to slide into place. And as you can see, that once it's all put together, it doesn't slide into place. So that's a thing. So what I may end up doing is, while this is still pliable, is to that. It fits in there like that. And you can see the way this is designed is that there's actually this is true in the real capsule. There's space behind the couches, and that was used. That was like a storage area. I can't remember if astronauts actually tried to go in there or not, but there is a gap underneath there, behind the couches. And then this thing, this thing somehow, I just say somehow because I don't understand how this is supposed to fit. It's supposed to be in front of their faces. Right? No matter how I try to do this, I can get the tabs underneath here like that. Kind of. But then these other tabs, I don't know, they line up with the other plastic. I don't know if they're supposed to go inside it or outside it. It just doesn't make sense. I think they're supposed to go outside, but it doesn't, none of this fit. Okay. And then there's this like angle brace on it. I mean, it doesn't, does that make sense that it would look like that? It doesn't make sense that these tabs would show like that. I don't understand how this is supposed to fit. See what I mean? I can't get it to go together in any way, shape, or form. This is going to be a thing I'm just going to have to play with over and over again at some point maybe before I even paint it, because continuing to manipulate it like this will scratch the paint off. So anyway, I have to take these out because there's like bits of plastic and junk on them that isn't supposed to be there. So right at the end, which should be one of the easiest things in the world to do, is to put the very last piece in. I have yet to figure out how that last piece fits. To say about that other than I can't get it to fit. Okay, I'm going to do some easy things first, and then I'm going to do the scary thing next, which is to get the window on. I'm doing some easy things first just to, ease myself into doing things. And then that window has to be attached. I can't continue to avoid it. Probably not true. I probably could continue to avoid it, but that would not accomplish anything other than avoiding it. Avoiding it might be a good thing. I mean, the hatch just gets kind of attached. Well, no, that's not true. The hatch really has to be attached to the command module here before I attach that to the floor, because it requires being both on the inside and outside in order to get it positioned right. And once it's attached, there's only the outside. It wouldn't work. It just I tried that before. It wouldn't work. I'm not sure it will work anyway. It's supposed to be pin hinged so that it operates. I don't think that's going to work either. Of course, I've said that about several other bits of this model that I don't know how this is going to work. And then so far they have worked. But doesn't mean that success will continue. Yeah, so I'm going to do the relaxing part before I do the not relaxing at all part. And if I mess up the window, it's not fatal. It's just really, really annoying because I tried to. That's the first one I made. The window on here, that's the prototype, and it actually turned out to look mostly okay. And I thought, well, I can improve on it, which is true. I could theoretically, at least, I can see ways that it could be improved. So the next one I tried, I cut out something that wasn't even circular. So I had to just discard it, threw it away because it just was not working. It wasn't good. And then I tried another one, and that was actually coming along pretty well. It was circular, or very close to being circular, and I was doing one last little bit of trim, one just little bit of improvement, and that's when it went flying onto the floor and disappeared. So it was, do I try a fourth one? And my answer at that point in time was no. I am not. But if I can get that on successfully, then that will be okay. It will look pretty good. It'll be a B, maybe a solid B in terms of quality. I think it's a little better than B minus, given the difficulty level of cutting a circle out of a tiny little piece of clear plastic and then painting a rim around it. I mean, that was I should get some difficulty points for that. I'm just sanding off just excess little bits of plastic that are sticking on here from the molding process. And then down here, I'm hoping that these aren't visible, but I can't count on that. These are those hideous molding circles that get put on here just because they feel like having little excess circles on their parts for no reason other than to be annoying and to mar the surface so that, it looks like there's little circles where there shouldn't be. Anyway, if I fail in attaching the window, then I will have to then I'll have to fabricate replacement. I'm very much hoping I don't have to do that. I'll probably have to do like 3 or 4 of them in order to get one that looks as good or better than that one. Okay, I'm going to sand out the circles just because I can't stand having them there. I built a submarine before this. Granted, I was building it mostly just on Wednesdays. That was the creation of Submarine Wednesday. Wednesday then becoming the day when I didn't work on Dungeons and Dragons, dungeon tiles, and minifigs. So even granting that, it took a long time. It took, I think, I don't know, a year of Wednesdays. And I kind of joked that it took as long, if not longer, to make the model of the submarine than it did to build the real thing. I don't think that was too terribly far off from being true. Excuse me, that's just going to persist. That little, I'm getting drainage. Post-nasal drip is what I'm getting. And I gag on it and cough. Anyway, it's I know it's annoying to me and it's annoying to you, but it is what it is. Almost got right. I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm not looking at this through magnification or anything. I'm just trying to get it so that I can't see it by looking at it. Usually what happens is that after it's painted, it becomes, it reappears at least a little bit. There's going to be a very slight depression there, because that circle is pretty deep. Still slightly there, but now it doesn't look like it's a huge flaw. It just looks like it's a thing that shouldn't, maybe, and it's going to be behind these, so I don't think it'll be very visible. It would have been nice if they put it on the back, right? Why did they have to put it on the front? At least it wasn't up here, like embedded in the instrument panel. Sometimes these circles do show up right in the middle of some sort of detail that's supposed to be part of the model. There's probably some sort of like Wikipedia article or something that says, why in the world are these little circles all over the place in your plastic model? They definitely were not part of the original design of whatever is being modeled. They don't seem to have any function in the molding process other than being annoying. So why are they there? It is a mystery I have not. Well, let's just say I haven't investigated it. I just complain about it. And I will continue to complain about it all the time whenever these things appear. There are a lot of them on the submarine, and many of them were in places that where they really interfered with the appearance of the model. So I ended up sanding some out. The sanding out process wasn't great, because when they're below the surface like this, when they're an indent, and the sanding out process leaves a divot, a low spot, and sometimes that's apparent. And then the sanding process itself can create a textural difference on the surface. So Sometimes I was pretty successful at getting rid of them, and other times, there was still evidence of their existence. It probably could have been using a little bit more aggressive sandpaper here than what I've got, and it would have been faster. But, what else is there to do other than this and complain about the molding process? Hi, Who. I will do a flip for you. Let me finish getting rid of this molding circle, which should have been done quite some time ago, but it's a lot deeper than some of the others. I'm really annoyed by this. And then I'll do a flip. But thanks for joining in. I'm not going to be able to get rid of this completely. It's really down deep in there. But I've reduced it to a little dimple anyway, and I hope, let me just check this. I'm pretty hopeful that once it's stalled, it should be very difficult to see. Is there a little black spot there? I do not know. That'll get painted over. Okay, move some things around and do a flip here. I'm just going to flip this bit that says on it. And very uncarefully just move some things aside. No, not Juan, 5-1. I'm using the 600 grit on this. I'm just doing edges here, so that should be okay. Oh, geez, look at that. Oh, that's the back. Whew. Wow, I almost got upset for no reason. That never happens, right? These bits of excess plastic here are where it was attached to the sprue. Sometimes they call them trees, as the plastic bits to which these are attached. That was redundant. It was attached to the place where they're attached. Sorry about redundant speaking, but yeah, that's what that is. And what I do, and I would recommend this to anybody who's building a model, is that you don't break them off. Definitely don't just break them off. And get like a little saw or maybe a sharp single-edged razor blade or a very good X-Acto knife or something, and cut them off, leaving some excess plastic like this. See that little bit kind of protruding there? Leave some excess plastic on the model piece because you can always sand it off like this. But if you break it off, and sometimes this plastic is fairly heavy, you can break a divot it'll not break off outside the model, it'll break off inside the model. And then you end up with a divot, a hole, you know, in your model that will be very difficult to repair. This is tedious, but not difficult. Filling in a hole that's a jagged hole that's left by breaking off the sprue would be difficult to repair. And I'd recommend avoiding it by cutting them off like I did, leaving some excess plastic there. As you can see, you know, especially since they're on the edge like that, it doesn't take too long to sand them off. And you're going to have to sand off your edges anyway, because way more often than not, you end up with some flashing, really thin little layers of plastic all around the edges of your pieces, because the mold didn't close completely, and a little bit of plastic oozed out between the two halves of the mold, and then you just have this real thin layer of kind of jagged plastic. And sometimes it just breaks off real cleanly, but sometimes, like right there, it was a little bit thicker, and it just left a jagged edge. Before the stream is over, I'm going to try test fitting again. I'm going to look at the instructions, because I can't get this piece to fit. I have tried over and over and over, and I don't understand quite how it's supposed to go. Other than that, no matter how I try, it doesn't go any. Okay, that was fairly okay. So when you look at your model, you can usually see that, like here, there's kind of this raised edge and some excess plastic up there where the whole molding thing just didn't work. It's very hard to not be too annoyed by this, because the next thing I need to do, which is to attach the window to the hatch, is I've got one chance at it, and it has to go right. And I don't want to do that while I am annoyed, because then there's a chance that my annoyance will cause a problem by just being annoyed. I need to be really focused and relaxed when I do that. So why don't I drink a whole lot more coffee? That would help, right? Let's see. Other than complaining about the build quality yet again, talking about Tom Terrific, I was doing that. That led to some speculation, or at least a reminder that there were other really cool cartoon heroes like Underdog. Underdog was pretty cool. Super Chicken was kind of fun, I guess. Super Chicken was back in the day when you could do things like have him get his superpowers by drinking his secret sauce out of a martini glass with an olive. Implying that his secret sauce really was an alcoholic beverage. And that was appropriate for little kids. Why not? Now there'd probably be some sort of, group up in arms about exposing their children to the implication of imbibing alcoholic beverages gives you superpowers. Now, granted, it was a cartoon and Super Chicken was a chicken. Okay. So this was not exactly a portrayal or an attempt to portray reality. But, things are what they are. And sometimes, it's really easy to get confused between reality and fiction. Although getting confused about the reality of a cartoon chicken and the fiction of a cartoon chicken and reality, I think that's kind of a stretch. Most, even young kids would really young kids would not, I think, be confused by that. I'm pretty sure that's true. Let's see what this looks like when when I fit it again. I'm thinking some of this that I'm removing here will actually improve the way it fits together. And I'm using a file just for 90-degree angles when I can't get sandpaper in there, just in these little spots like this. This is down where it's attached to the floor. And that's going to be invisible. So a little bit of rough surface texture there shouldn't hurt things. Circles. These circles, I'm glad I looked. These circles will definitely be visible, especially this one here. This is the back, and the seats go here, and this is open, and that circle is going to show. So I'm glad I looked at it from a different angle. I mean, in one sense, I'm glad I looked at it in the sense that I saw the circle, and the other sense is that I'm not all that glad I looked at it because now I need to make sure that circle disappears. And then I'll probably do is just sand the whole bit here so that the texture is pretty much the same. Oh, well. There we go. Let's have at it. I think it's raised above the surface. Those are the easiest ones to get out. Those that I can just sand that. Down to the surface rather than having to sand the whole surface down to the bottom of the hole. But of course, that would be there. Anyway, I'm pretty sure that the appropriate conclusion was that Tom Terrific, claiming to be the greatest hero ever, was not necessarily a lie, but certainly undeserved puffery. For two reasons, really. One is, there are heroes. In some ways, it depends on the context. I'll take that back. If he was just comparing himself to cartoon heroes that appeared on the Captain Kangaroo show, Like it depends on the context, right? If that were the context in which he were boasting about the greatest hero ever, he very well might have been the greatest hero ever to appear as a cartoon on the Captain Kangaroo show. On the other hand, if you were comparing himself to all of existence, then it's highly unlikely that he was the greatest hero ever, because there'd be somebody else, either cartoon or real, that was a greater hero. The other kind of reason to be skeptical about the claim is that if he was never putting himself in danger, then his actions might not really be considered to be heroic, in that sense. But nonetheless, that was Tom Turuha's claim. And it made for a decent theme song, and there's something to be said for that. Greatest hero ever. Terrific is the name for me because I'm so clever. It's not a bad rhyme. It's a little bit forced, but there certainly have been worse. There's been worse rhymes even in, like popular songs. Especially critical of rhymes that are forced. They don't seem like they're forced, but they are, by changing the word order from normal word order to like reverse, putting the verb at the end kind of thing. A lot of poetry and songs do that. It's like nobody talks that way. Oh, well, poetry talks that way, I guess. I guess you could say that. Anyway, that's a little bit of a thing about rhyming, is I think that really good rhyming would use natural. I'll use common, not natural, because that's a real value judgment. Typical common word order, and not just sound weird and dumb like some rhyming does. Anyway, this is taking longer than I expected because I found those circles, and those circles happen to be in places that are highly visible. And so, especially this one that was up in front. So that was kind of an annoyance. It's a little harder to get to because there's some detail in front of it that I don't want to erase with the sandpaper. And it's up against a 90-degree angle bit there. And then just going over the entire surface this way to keep the surface texture consistent. Okay, I put that in the box and do this last bit. The same sort of thing. There's, plastic bits all around the edges. Some of them are from the sprue. Some of them are just molding issues. And then there's circles. I wonder if these little bits of plastic were interfering with the fit, the way pieces fit when I tried to get them to go. Guess I'll find out when I retry after I do the cleaning up bit. to the DM about getting the music back on. The problem I'm having is that I'm running out of stuff to talk about after having done this stream for so long. I got to talk about my experiences when I was young with the space race, which was apropos of, not a cool word, apropos, relevant to the Apollo model that I'm working on. Getting a little impatient here, but I think it's safe to use a file on this to get in the edges and corner. Yeah, I got, growing up in the 50s and 60s, I got to watch the advent of transistors. I could talk about transistor radios again. That was kind of a fun topic. So when you hear about transistors, but the context now is, there's several 100,000, if not 1 million of them, put on a chip. That's what you think of as, this chip has 150,000 transistors. And so people now, I think, will think about transistors as these really, I'll call them microscopic. It really is true that you can't see them without a microscope. Multi-layered silicon, doped silicon things that are put on chips. But when transistors first came out, each one, not millions or tens of thousands or hundreds or even tens, but ones, a single transistor was a thing. They were not that small, really. They, I don't know. If you look at this and you see the tape inside the window there, that was a transistor would be that big. It would be like a rectangular, almost cubic kind of component. And it would have 3 little wires sticking out of it. And those 3 little wires were the actual connectors for, what are they? The source and the drain and the gate. Did I say those right? I think those were the components of the transistors. Okay. So yeah, the transistors I grew up with were like that. And they would be just like a resistor or a capacitor, the standard components of an electrical circuit, which were also not microscopic little bits on a chip, but actual things you could hold in your hand and manipulate. Okay. Those were transistors. And they were soldered into circuit boards, these kind of beadboard things that had little holes in them. And you could stick the wires through the little holes and solder them on the back. And transistors were like that. They were real life things you could hold in your hand and manipulate. And there were different kinds of them. And when you were putting together a circuit, you get the right kind and then wire it in so that the connectors were connected to the stuff that either controlled the gate or created the current that went in through the source or came out through the drain. They were essentially they're switches, right? Just like vacuum tubes were essentially switches. So it was a big deal when transistors came out because their major function was to replace a vacuum tube. And they had I mean, size was obviously one. They were 50th as big, maybe 5% is in terms of volume, maybe less than that, because some vacuum tubes were actually pretty large. Of the vacuum tubes they replaced, so clearly size was one. Weight, they were much lighter than vacuum tubes, and even though they did emit heat, not nearly as much as vacuum tubes emitted heat. Vacuum tubes were little radiators. You had when you turned on your television and a dozen or so vacuum tubes lit up, not only did you get this really nice warm orange glow on the whole inside of your television set, but it was also very warm, and sometimes if it was cold, you'd huddle around. No, didn't really do that. Didn't really huddle around the TV for warmth, but you could, in a sense, because the tubes in it emitted a lot of heat. That included the gigantic picture tube. The transistors, were smaller, lighter, cooler, in that they didn't produce as much heat. And their first really big commercial use, they were used for all sorts of things, scientific equipment and stuff like that. But the biggest popular use, the thing that really made transistors a big deal, were transistor radios. And the first ones, were not, I think you're kind of become familiar with the ones that were I don't know, like 3 inches by 5 inches by an inch thick or something, really pretty small. But it was kind of miraculous to take what had been a box that was, I don't know, like 12 by 6 by 3 or something like that, depending on the size of the speaker or whatever, that was always on a shelf or on a counter or whatever, or maybe even inside of a piece of furniture, to take that and you could carry it in your pocket. And that became extremely popular because you could take music with you. You don't think, well, that's a big deal, but it was. You could take music with you by having a transistor radio that you could hold in your pocket. And of course, there was always a thing then about it being disruptive because people would bring them to school and whatever. But I remember there's also a social status associated with transistor radios, because the manufacturer would make it a point to print on the outside of the case how many transistors were on the inside. And so, regardless or irregardless, you could use either word, because I guess they mean the same thing. Why have two words like that sound similar and that they should be opposites, but they are the same, like flammable and inflammable? Anyway, the status thing was to have the radio with the most transistors. So if you had an 8 transistor radio, okay, that certainly was a lot better than having a 6 transistor radio, but not nearly as good as, say, having an 11 transistor radio. I don't think there were any really that had that many. And we had we were kids, right? And like 12 or 13 years old, maybe younger when they first came out, is what difference did it make? You could, what should have made a difference is you'd play both radios and you'd say which one sounds better, right? Or which one tunes more easily and accurately, has less static in it, or can pick up the station that's furthest away if that was an important thing. If there was a station that was further away that played the music that everybody wanted. Okay, I mean, there's kind of those performance things, right, that probably should have mattered. But no, when you're like, I'll just say 12 years old, you could be anywhere from, 10 to 14 or 15. But, the younger people, especially if your radio had more transistors, it was just a way better radio. As far as social status of radio having. Of course, having a radio was definitely better than not having a radio. But yeah, the advent of transistors as a widely available commercial product gave rise to a whole level, a whole new way of measuring social status. I'm not sure that anybody really even paid attention to what each other was playing. What are you playing on your radio? I don't remember anybody ever asking that. What station do you listen to? Sometimes they would ask that, I guess. Like, what station do you listen to? Those people had, there might be like 4 or 5 different AM. They were AM radios, not FM radios, the first ones. There might be like 4 or 5 different stations if you were in kind of an urban area that played different kind of music. So you might ask, what do you play? But mostly you just asked, how many transistors does your radio have? And sometimes, so you take the case off to replace batteries. Batteries didn't last as long. So that was something you do. But some people were either brave or foolish, or the radio wasn't working anyway. So what the heck, would take the case off to take a look at the inside. And people would gather around and try to identify which of the little bits inside of there were the transistors and which were something else. It was pretty easy usually. You could tell the difference between a resistor and a transistor, because resistors were always these little cylinders, usually dark brown or black, with different colored stripes painted on them. And the different colored stripes told the manufacturer or the repair person what the resistance was. The resistor capacity, not the capacity that is misleading because it sounds like capacitor. But you could tell which ones the resistors were because they were cylindrical and had these little lines on them. And at one point, I even kind of knew what the lines meant, or at least I had a guidebook that said what they were, so you could tell what the resistance capacity was. But the resistors and the capacitors actually look pretty similar to each other. And so when one opened the case and started prodding around on the inside, it wasn't always that easy to identify the transistors. But, if you had a transistor radio that it said it had 7 transistors in it and the case came off, you definitely wanted to verify that, especially since it was a social status thing. It's like, yeah. What did you do? Just paint that on? Let's see them. Show me the transistors. It's unimaginable now because Transistors, resistors, and capacitors are all invisible. Yuck. Okay, well, this is that about? As I'm rotating this, I'm just seeing another. Sometimes, and this is a small one, but sometimes when these plastic parts are pulled off of the mold, there's a blob of plastic that's left behind. Sometimes, like on the heat shield, it was really obvious. It was awful. And sometimes like this, it's not very visible, but it's but under the right light, it is. And who knows when this is assembled if that could even be seen back there or not. And if it was seen, whether or not it would look like something. Check the other one, see if it's got the same sort of blob. All right. So this next, the thing I'm going to do here is grab a paper towel. I'm going to try to get some of the dust off of these first, because when I want to do some test fitting, and what I want to do is not get little bits of white plastic dust all over the floor of the command module. Well, that circle is not anywhere near gone. It's really not good. I don't know. I'm going to dig away at that just a little bit more, because it really is not good. It's just very deep. The one on this side came out pretty well, but the one over here is not out. If this were in a more visible part of the model, it would be a serious problem. Yeah, if it were to more, I'd have to be trying to fill that in. I can't dig away at that much longer without causing another problem. Okay, I'm going to be trying to test fit again. This time, I'm going to pull out the directions. On occasion, it's actually been helpful. Believe it or not, the assembly instructions have actually been helpful. The first thing I did was I built this tower, the escape tower, and they said, do this, attach one side of lattice and the circular thing on the inside. Okay, that kind of circular brace, and then put the rest of this together. And I thought, no, that's just not going to work at all. And I tried all sorts of things like using tape or rubber cement or other kinds of things to temporarily hold the pieces. What I did do was I used this piece. This piece here actually is I put the pegs here in that so that they would line up later. But that assembly sequence actually worked. I was very surprised. So in this case, it says, attach these three pieces, and then they're supposed to look seamless like this, which they definitely don't. And then slide in the seats and attach this thing. And that thing is the thing that doesn't attach. So I'm going to put these bits back in here. I've done this a couple of times now. And they do fit better now that I clean them up. They're not beautiful, but they're better. Okay. And I'm going to take the seats. See if this slides in or not. Yeah, it really doesn't. Okay. It continues to be well, one thing I can do, I'm a little bit reluctant, is sand this down so it's a little smaller. I really would like to be able to follow the directions and have this be, hold this in place like this. Have this be cemented together and to be able to slide this in. And I'm going to take a chance here. I'm going to take a little bit off the side. Not very much, just a little bit. The thing that holds this is quite deep, so there's a fair amount of give, but I would like to be able to slide this in after this was assembled and not while it is being put together. The more parts that have to be held in place at the same time, that was just enough. And that's one of those little slightly surprising things is as I'm holding this in what I believe to be where it needs to be, this now goes into place so that whatever it was, like 1/100th of an inch or something, was the right thing to do. Now there's this thing. I'll show you this. It gives you this incredibly unhelpful diagram. And this bit there, it shows you that, right? This supposedly is at an angle that fits this angle and rests against a vertical. It's pretty clearly explicit that way, but there isn't any okay. I don't know why those other tabs are there, but it looks like we can't. I'll show it to you in a second. It looks like it's supposed to be like this, which is why those tabs neither went inside nor outside. Okay. Finally, I get it. It's not intuitive. Okay. This tab looks like it should go into something or under something, but the way it actually works is that that tab, this tab just sets on this surface, and this, just like this drawing here, actually does match up against this, and this, and kind of like that. And that, wow, that's supposed to be cemented on. That is altogether going to be a challenge. Mm-hmm. Test this all again. This is all cemented together so that it just looks like it's supposed to look, right? Then this edge here is supposed to match up with these things rest on it. Yeah. See how easy it is to hold these things? And then you're supposed to hold them in place, applying steady but not too great pressure for 60 seconds. Yeah. Well, it sort of fits. This side fits. There's a gap on this side. I don't know what's causing that. I don't see any difference in the plastic on both sides, but one side seems to fit. They just fit differently on the two sides. That's all I can say. Okay, well, somehow that's supposed to attach and not fall off, but at least now, for the very first time, I get some idea of how that's supposed to go. And what I'm seeing as I'm doing this is the round bit. Hi. I'll explain that in just a bit. I am working on the command module of the Apollo. I am doing well, and I hope you are as well. I will show this. I'll show you the instruction manual so you can see the whole thing. I'm test fitting this, and as I'm looking at this, I can see that this round bit that is, near my hand is supposed to fit on the inside of this. And I'm hoping that that's the case, because once this is put in place, if that fit doesn't work, there's going to be a very delicate filing that will need to be done, and there's no way to test this before I put it together, because unless I use maybe rubber cement and try it. Here, I'm building this. This is the Apollo stack. This whole thing sits on top of the Saturn V rocket, on top of the third stage. And it consists of the escape tower. It has little rocket motors on the inside here that if something goes wrong, it pulls the command module. This is released, and it takes it away, and then it parachutes back down. This does, after this is jettisoned. This is the command module, which is the thing I'm working on now. This is the service module. If you ever saw Apollo 13, or, the movie, or heard about it, one of the tanks inside of here blew up. So this is the thing that an explosion inside of here almost caused Apollo 13 to become deadly. And then underneath here, this is a fairing. It's stuck a storage compartment for the lunar module. That's the part that landed on the moon. There's two parts. There's a part with the rocket engine that descended onto the moon, the descent stage. It has the spindly little legs that you see, and then this is the top part where the two astronauts stood when they landed on the moon. And I finished this, and the two parts of the lunar module are in boxes over there. And now the last part I'm working on is the command module. And there's a lot of... I'm glad I saved it for the end. I thought it would be difficult to do. Then when I started building it, I thought, no, this is actually going to be pretty easy. And it's turning out not to be. Because the parts don't always fit all that well. So yeah, this all goes inside. The little astronaut couches go in here. And I've got them so that they work now. It gets cemented in. There's little astronaut figures that sit there. And then this thing is the part that goes over the top. And it's taped up because I'm going to be painting it. The inside of this is spray painted this sort of grayish blue color. And then the outside is painted a pearlescent white, like the body of the rest of the ship. The parts I'm working on here are basically the control panel that surrounds the astronauts. It's supposed to look like this. This is a picture of one of the real Apollo control panels. And what I'm going to try to do along with Alexis, our DM, is Photoshop this down to the right size and shape to be applied to these surfaces so that it doesn't just look like nothing. I mean, there's some of the controls are embossed on this, kind of, but painting that would be next to impossible. So we're going to try to do it as an applique. But these parts look like they're not going to fit. So what I'll be able to do with that is they're supposed to be painted this blue color as the base color as they're ready to be primed and painted. And I'll probably do that tomorrow, spray painted. So I can't do that here. There's no way I can do that under this camera. It just is too messy, and it's not that well ventilated. So anyway, as usual, I'm accomplishing almost nothing and taking a lot of time to do it. But these are ready to be painted. I know that they kind of fit. And I need to put them somewhere where it's out of the way. Just put them back in the box. These are the cute little astronauts that get to sit on the cute little couch, which disappeared. Oh, duh. Yeah, they sit here like this. There's 3 of them. And then you can kind of see them by looking through the hatch of the command module. And then there isn't that much more to do today. But one thing I needed to do, well, let me clean up here first. I've got sanding dust all over the place. Yeah, dramatic cleaning with paper towel on cardboard, right? One of these days I should probably show off the parts that are done. I keep saying that, but then I don't. So I said it again, and I probably don't now, but sometime I probably should, just to prove that, in fact, I have completed some parts of the model. This is getting to the point now where I'm not sure what's going to happen on Friday. I say that because other than getting this painted, I have to finish masking this, paint on the inside and then mask the inside and paint the outside. There isn't, I mean, just some unmasking and masking is about all that could possibly be done on the stream. And that's been delayed because of this bit right here. See how it extends off the side? Well, when this is put onto the heat shield, which is down here, there's an opening there. And I mean, for a model, who cares, right? But if this is supposed to represent the real thing, there would have been basically a duct that would conduct superheated gases into the inside of the command module. And so I'm trying to fill that in. And I need to wait for this to dry yet. I put some in on Monday, and then when I sanded it down yesterday just to see how it was, I found out that it shrunk and it didn't fill the space very well. So I added some more, and I need for it to dry. So on Friday, I can sand that down a little bit and finish taping this, but I'm kind of running out of things to do. So Friday will be anything can happen day, to use an old Disney thing, because I'm not sure what I'm going to do then, because I can't assemble the rest of this really until I get the appliques for the control panels done, which could take anything from a day to a month. And then it's just the final assembly, and that should go pretty quickly once that's done. But what I might do, well, anything can happen Friday. We'll see. I'll have all of about 15 minutes of sanding and taping, and then there'll be a little bit more. This is a real. Where did the tweezers? I have two sets of tweezers, one of which, there it is, might work, and one of which wouldn't. This is the inside of the hatch. And it's got a window on it. And, oh, there's some other little bits. I found some other bits that I can work on. Okay, that's good. I'll show them to you a little bit later. Where's the picture of the hatch? Keep burying stuff. Well, there it is. I just found it where I wasn't looking. This is the real hatch. That is a picture of the real hatch. This is the model hatch, and as you can tell, a lot of this, like the emergency handle, okay, and this crank, whatever that does, that's probably something that makes sure that it's locked. Those are not represented here, but there is a hole for the window. The window hole on the model is smaller than the real thing. And instead of having like a piece of molded clear plastic, like a lot of models have, like canopies on planes, right? The windows on this model are cut out of very thin, clear plastic. The plastic that was provided with the model was very, very small, not enough. And as I discovered the hard way, but at least I discovered it before it was too late, there's also not enough of it. And so I've been using the tops of takeout containers. And I need to see which side has the paint on it. I guess I had it right the first time. So I cut out a circle and I painted the rim so that it looks a little bit like this, a representation of it anyway. And now I need to attach this to the door. And I need to place it very carefully. That. So what I'm going to do is use this stuff, this canopy cement. It's supposed to not to dissolve the plastic. But I've tested this before. It sort of sticks. It's not as good as other adhesives, but it's a little bit easier to use. because it's fairly liquid. I just need a piece of paper. Here's a piece of paper. I'm going to squeeze some out, use the tip of a toothpick, very, very carefully apply it right around the rim of the circle, then lift this on and set it on so that it's perfectly aligned and looks good. Or I hope anyway. All right. I am going to do my best to not mess this up. If I mess it up, then I'll have to do a lot of repair work. To redo all of this. I got too much there. I'm hoping what I can do is take a tiny bit of paper towel and clear that off. I think that the point of a toothpick wouldn't put too much on. It did. And I need to get the placement just about perfect the first time, because if I slide it around, it will smear. Okay, and I'm not going to use that toothpick. It's got cement on it. But I don't think I can get it any better. Make sure on it. Okay, I'm going to declare that a success. So, it's not perfect, but if you look at it now, that frame does make it look more like the real thing than before. And it's not perfect, but it gives that impression. Okay. So I'm going to put this in the do not play with it again. Okay. I just knocked it over. And then knocking it over, I reminded myself I have this entire piece to paint. This is the parachute thing. This is the apparatus that holds the parachutes, the 3 parachutes that land the capsule, the drogue chute and the pilot chute. Apparently, the parachutes themselves are orange and white, but apparently inside this they were covered in some sort of cover, like a parachute case, right? That was brown. So I'm going to paint these brown and then wash them with a brown wash to bring out the detail in the covers. There's also like some shroud lines, parachute cords that are showing in some places. I'm going to paint those a different color of brown to the extent that I can see them and identify them. There are just a few places where they appear. Here and here and here. And I'm pretty sure that those are the shroud lines because they attach to this, which I am pretty sure is supposed to represent the mortar, the little explosive device that blows up, pulls this cord, which pulls out the parachute. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it. So this is going to be painted red because it's explosive, as is this and this. These pieces of apparatus are going to be painted kind of maybe a dark metallic or flat black. These are some parachute lines here. And this whole base is kind of like the inside. It's the inside of the apparatus. And that I'm going to be painting Oh, a metallic color that's a little bit different than this. Okay. It'll be a lighter color, a lighter shade of metallic, and these will be a darker shade of metallic. And then some are red, and then this is brown. Yeah, I've got a whole lot of painting to do that I just completely forgot about as I was doing all the rest of this stuff, including putting the window on and getting these parts now finally figured out how they fit. It's getting close to break time, so I'm not going to start painting until after break. And that will give me some painting to do, which will be kind of cool. I haven't done that in a while. And it'll give me a chance to find some colors and things. And that, but before break, as I attempt to fail at my attempt to clean up around here a little bit, I want to talk about Dyson Dungeons. This is going to be my promo for Dyson Dungeons. And then I'm going to come back and work on painting this parachute thing. And I'm going to close this. I'm going to take these parts out. Why am I taking these parts out? They need to be painted. They need to be primed and painted, that light blue color. And if I leave them in the box, I'm going to forget about them. That just happens. I'm going to put this in the box because I can't do anything with this until Friday. That patch has to set. So this box of things that should not be played with anymore today is going to go over here. Okay, Dyson Dungeons is a group of family and friends, and we put on an amazing Dungeons and Dragons show. And that Dungeons and Dragons show has been going on for some time. It is in a world, a homebrew world created by our DM, Alexis. It's great fun. It's a lot of fun to produce, and I have watched some episodes. Even having been in them and knowing what was going on, I find them really quite entertaining, I must say. So if you're interested in that, I would strongly encourage you to maybe go on YouTube and check out one or more of the previous episodes of our Dungeons and Dragons show. It also streams with a live chat. They're recorded, but they stream with a live chat on Sundays at 2 Eastern Daylight Time now. In a month or so, it'll be Eastern Standard Time, I guess. But yeah, you should really check it out. It's great fun, and that's what we are all about. Why am I building an Apollo model when we are a Dungeons and Dragons show? That's a good question. Thank you for that. That's what you're supposed to say when you're doing a Q&A thing. That's a wonderful question. Like, you always compliment the question asker. It might be like the stupidest question in the world, but you wouldn't say, that's a really dumb question. I'm not going to respond to that. Get out of my audience. Why are you wasting my time? I shouldn't say that, right? I should say, that's a great question. I'm building an Apollo model because I finished the cutaway Renwall submarine model. And I was building the submarine mainly on Submarine Wednesdays because this stream started as a place where I painted dungeon tiles. I'm going to show these off because I've got 10 minutes before the break time. And I do need to take a break soon. I will just say that, I need to take a break. But on our Dungeons and Dragons show, we have adventures that sometimes take us into dungeons. And those dungeons can be dungeons, or they could be castles, or they could be taverns, or they could be warehouses. They could be sewers. We have sewer tiles. But this stream started because these dungeon tiles, which I will show you in more detail, are printed on the PLA printers back there. Okay, so they're all custom made that way. We have corners and regular floors and inside corners and all sorts of different variations of these things, rounded corners. If you look at the scroll underneath my picture, if you're watching this stream, some of the dungeons, smaller dungeons, show up there. So they're printed in black PLA, and then they're primed. And this stream started because they needed to be painted so that they would look more like this. And so we were painting them for the show, and our DM said, well, why don't you stream the painting? And I said, that's a dumb idea. Why would I do that? And she said, you're going to do it anyway and set up what is not a studio, but some surplus equipment. There's an extra microphone and an extra ring camera and a little camera up there that's pointed at me for a reason I don't know why. And yeah, started painting these, and it was actually kind of fun. It feels when this is all being painted gray, we go through a lot of paint and a broad brush. It felt like it took forever, but when I was watching the stream, it actually moved along pretty quickly. And that's when I started talking about nonsense from the 60s and whatever to fill the time while I was painting these. Anyway, they're primed and then painted, and then details are painted on them like these bricks. And these would then be washed with a gray wash to make them look worn. These look like wood. Okay, same process, different colors. They're primed and then painted brown, and then wash is put over them to really bring out the wood grain and enhance the color. And then in this case, the stucco is painted on. This one features one of our doors. We have operating doors. So during our show, say, for example, we were inside here, okay, standing here, and we listen to the door and hear movement on the other side, and we think, oh, this could be, let's drop things. This could be dangerous, but we want to get into this room on the other side. So you could put your figure here on camera. The camera would show this, and open the door, because it opens. See that? Pretty clever, huh? And stand behind the door, and maybe somebody from the other side would come by, and you could sneak attack them or find out that they were friendly, and you go, oh, hi, I was just hiding behind your door. Never mind me. And then little detail gets painted on there, like the straps and the door knocker and stuff. And we have other cool tiles, like one of our tiles in one of our dungeons has a cauldron in it. And if this were like a fire mage cauldron, say, for example, it were in a room with a fire sigil, which is molded on, it's printed onto the surface and then painted in detail. You would say, the fire mage would say, flame on, and then a flame would come on. And that makes the show really much cooler to have those kinds of effects. We even have traps. So you're walking along I don't know what that is or why it's on there, but it's coming off. You're walking along this hallway in the show. Little minifig. We have minifigs of our characters, and we don't check for traps. Of course, we wouldn't. We never do. But a trap is triggered. Okay, the way this would be portrayed on the show would be that rotates, and now there's a place there where something bad, like a flame or a gas cloud or whatever, could come out and get us as we're walking along. So we have all sorts of real cool custom sorts of things. We basically have three kinds of tiles. There's the rough stone, there's the cut stone, and then there's the wood. And these can be painted different colors to represent different things. Like some of our dungeons are red granite, so these are painted red instead of gray. And we have some tiles where the stucco is green. I really like that combination. we kind of settled on this as being more generic. But there's some with blue on it and green, and that came out. And the wood can be different colors too. Instead of this, we have a couple that have really light wood. Anyway, that's how this stream started. Look, I made a little maze. The stream started by producing these dungeon tiles for our Dungeons and Dragons show. Oh yeah, the coolest thing about these, I ruined this one. I scraped off the paint when I was trying to get rid of that white spot. Messed it up. Is that under these plates, there's ball magnets in each corner, and so they stick to each other. You can use clips to hold them together, but the clips are really hard, relatively hard, to put together and take apart. And sometimes you can get tiles that have magnets in the bottom, but you need to adhere them to a metallic plate. These just hold each other. And they're very easy to, as you can see, they're really easy to take apart and rearrange in all sorts of different ways, which makes them highly versatile and makes it easy for our DM to create all sorts of terrible places for us to enter. And at least so far, also get out. Although I was mostly dead twice during our show. So that, if you're wondering why did this stream start and what does it have to do with Dice and Dungeons, it started with this. But then when we had enough dungeon tiles to do all the dungeons we needed for the show, and there weren't any need for any minifigs to represent either friendly or unfriendly characters that we would run into and meet, I started working on models. And one of the first ones was a Big Daddy Roth pink model. Look it up on the internet. It is a real thing. I love building those as it's a young teen. They reissued them back in the 90s, and I got all the reissues. And I would like to build more, but apparently people don't like to watch. There isn't a niche market for Big Daddy Roth Fink models. So I built a submarine, a really cool 1960s vintage. Actually, the models were from the 60s. I built one when I was like in 7th grade. And I got off of eBay some partially completed models. I got 3 of them to build one. And when that was done, started working on the Apollo, because this is a cool model. This is really getting close to being done. Other than getting the appliques for this, I might run out of things to do on Friday until these are completed. And so I'll probably be actually next week, believe it or not, I might be moving on to the next model. And I know what that's going to be because after I finished the submarine, I went through like 7 or 8 options, and the viewers said it was 2-0. 2 people expressed an opinion and said, build the Apollo. But the one that got nothing, which survived the other pairwise comparisons, is I'm going to pull it out and then take a break. This is the magical preview. I'm looking forward to this. This is the Savoia S21. This is Porco Rosso's plane, and this is a 1/48 scale model of Porco Rosso's airplane. And it actually is a cutaway. The fuselage comes off, and you can see some of the interior detail, like the fuel tank and the cockpit. I've started to get a little more confidence in my model building. It's an Italian model, as you can see. All the descriptions are in Italian. It's also the scale that I like building, 1/48 scale. Hi, Ole. Thanks for dropping in. I'm getting really close to moving on to the Savoia. I'm kind of finishing up as much as I can on the... Oh, of course you do. Yeah. Okay. So daughter to skating practice, son to soccer practice. Are they at least on different days? So you don't have to try to do both at the same time in two different places? The Apollo is almost done. Let me show you the bits. But it's getting to the point where I can't do anything more about it until I get the applique done. So I've got the base done. I attached the window to the door successfully today. I managed to cut out a circle and attach it. It doesn't look like much, but these bits are completed. Okay, this just needs to be spray painted inside and out. So what needs to be done? This is all that needs to be done, but this is kind of a problem. Is I need to paint the parachute compartment. I'm going to work on that after break. And then these are the parts of the instrument panels that surround the astronauts. And as I've said before, that what I'm going to be attempting to do is use a photo of the instrument panel like this. Wow. You must be putting hundreds of thousands of miles on your car in a year. Isn't that cool? But yeah, this is what you get with the model. It's just very lightly embossed, and it would be impossible to paint. I mean, the detail on that would be impossible to paint. And so what we're going to try to do is take this, which is the actual instrument panel, and Photoshop it, print it on really good quality paper, shape it to these panels, okay, as much as we can, and apply it. So it should have come with a decal. You know, the model should have come with decals for the instrument panels, but we're not going to be able to fabricate decals. What we might be able to fabricate is printed in. Holy cow! You know, especially that's like crossing your entire country, what, 10 times in a year? That's just incredible. So yeah, I don't envy you. Oh yeah, and then you have winter. It's probably not quite as bad as our Michigan winters in terms of snow and cold, but yeah, anytime it's slippery. Mm-hmm. Yep. So you can cross that many times a year. Yeah, that's just amazing. But kids are kids, and you have to give them what they need. So I admire what you're doing. Anyway, the thing that's going to stop me from finishing 30 times, yeah, I would love to drive across even our state 30, the equivalent of 30 times a year. Oh, no kidding. She has skating practice every day. Wow, that's really intense. Is she getting really good at it? Can you show videos on your blog, on your stream? No, I'm not kidding. I think that would be, I think it'd be kind of cool if she's willing, if that's the kind of thing you can do. Because if she's practicing that much, she must be really good at skating. The thing that's going to, oh, of course, well, maybe sometime in the future. You can tell her that your fans are asking uh, for to have a chance to see her skating because we've heard so much about it. Anyway, getting these, I understand, but tell her anyway that she has some long distance fans. I'm going to try to get these appliques done so I can put them on here so they don't just look stupid in the inside of the capsule. And once that's done, then I can probably finish that up right away, within a day. but I don't know how long it's going to take to get these done. And so, the completion of the Apollo model might just wait for a while I start the Savoia. But I do have some things to work on today and on Friday, so that's what I'll be doing. Thanks for dropping in, Ole. I really appreciate it. That's always great. And yeah, take care of your kids. Great. Drive careful. Oh, yeah. I set this down here. Why not? This is another thing I can work on. I almost completely forgot about it. The model comes with a moon base. It doesn't look very moony at all. It's like a satire of a moon almost, with a number of craters and everything. But this is designed so that the LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, can sit on here and look like it's on the moon. And then one of the Apollo figures can kind of stand around. What I can be doing with this is I'm going to prime it gray, is I can play around with all sorts of shading, right? Like different colors of gray and on the insides of the craters, and do some washes to bring out all the texture. So what I'm going to do today, and this is a stand for the entire thing. The fairing that holds the entire model fits on the outside of this circle. It sort of holds this. This is supposed to actually be the ocean. So that when your command module lands, it's supposed to splash down in the ocean, but it doesn't look like that at all. I don't know how I'm going to paint this, but I have gray primer, so I'm going to prime this gray and then do a bunch of shading on it. I'm just going to prime this white, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it. But what I do know is that after break, I'm going to get rid of the flatting on the edge, just sand down the edges, so that when I paint these later today or tomorrow, I can get these painted too, and that'll give me something to do for Friday. But yeah, a little bit late for break. It's great for Ole to drop in. If you are watching this and you're not watching Ole's YouTubes, you should. You really need to. He puts on a really good show and shows you how to make amazing models and scenery for D&D. I'm going to take a break now because I really need to take a break. I'm going to come back, work on the parachute thing, clean these up a little bit. Remember to take these up to be painted. And then on Friday, I'll be wrapping as much of this as I can, and maybe starting on the Savoia, but the Savoia probably will be starting on Monday. But I'll be back in roughly half an hour. Okay? See you then. There we are. Okay, back from break. Wow, okay. I'm really late. Sorry about that. I'm going to work on the parachute thing for a while. Then I'm going to take a little time to just clean up the edges of the moon base thing here, which I'm going to put out of the way. Sorry, I really didn't intend to take that long. I thought I was watching the clock. Obviously not. And there is the thing I need. Place to put paint. I need a color for the parachutes. The brown color that's going to be washed in a darker brown, so I don't want it real dark. The brown with the brown wash looks really good. Yep, I am back. I don't know why I took that long. That was just a mistake, I guess. I'm going to use this light colored brown for the shroud lines, the parachute chords so that it's different enough so that it shows. And what color brown am I going to use for the brown? Pork brown might be good if I can find it here. I don't think I pulled almost all of these paints out and they're just sitting around being in the way. There's Beastie Brown. That could be a fallback. That's not bad. When I want colors. I am so not prepared. There it is. There it is. Wow, that needs a lot of stirring. I'm going to try this color, see if I can get it mixed up. You can see how the colors kind of separated already. So this is going to take a little bit of shaking up. Yeah, wow. I should have been back like at least 10 minutes ago. Just started. What I did was I started reading some of the news and just got distracted by it. I apologize. So what I'm going to do the rest of the stream today is work on this for a while. At the very end, I want to clean up the moon base. And then on Friday, I'll probably finish this because I'm just not going to be as far along on it as I was hoping because I didn't come back from break on time. Sometimes that happens, things come up, just stop paying attention, didn't set an alarm. I'm going to put on my head magnifier so I can see where the paint is going. And I'm going to do some painting. Painting with Dice and Dungeons, believe it or not. Let me just two brushes. I'm going to use this one for the edges, and then this one for filling it in. This is the kind of painting where sometimes it goes back and forth, where the paint doesn't always go where I want it. I'm going to paint over where the parachute cords are going to go. Paint over that with this color, and then paint over it with the other color. Sometimes painting over the detail makes it easier to see it later. I found that to be kind of true. So right here, on all of these, there's this device that I consider to be an explosive device. But then the parachute cord comes around it. And then there's this area here between the parachute cord and the other thing think that's actually the parachute, and that the cord wraps itself around the top of it, pulls it. I knew that would happen. That's where I'm going to have to do some touch up later, probably, where I paint in the wrong spot. It's on camera. That part's good. I was talking about transistors. When I grew up and transistors became a thing, I mean, they'd been invented, some time ago, but they didn't really become an inexpensive consumer product like they did when the big breakthrough thing was transistor radios. And it wasn't so much replacing the home radio. It continued to be a fairly large sort of thing with a bigger speaker. But the big deal was the pocket portable radio, the pocket-sized one. That became a very popular thing to have when one was like just a preteen or young teen. Well, one's status was, believe it or not, somewhat dependent on how many transistors your radio had. I guess in some way that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because then we were not tuned to things like the tuning ability of one's radio, or the fidelity of the sound, or whether or not the bass came through clearly. Transistors does your radio have? Not having really any clue made any real difference in terms of performance or not, or particularly caring if it did either, really. Transistors does your radio have actually carried over into another piece of equipment. It's a teen, and that is your watch. It wasn't like who made your watch. It definitely did not grow up in a place where we even knew that. I think it was like until much later when the digital watches came out. What did we even know about watch brands? Well, I think that was it. They advertised a lot. Really great ads. I'm digressing here. I'm going to come back to status in a little bit. But there was one brand I remember, they had these amazing commercials where they tortured the watch. Oh, it's still running. one thing they did was they attached it to the propeller of an outboard motor. Okay. And then put the outboard motor in a barrel. To run water. It would do damage to the motor because they were water cooled. Water was pumped through them and discharged back into the water. That's another thing. It's another thing people don't think about, which is really important, is the exhaust of outboard motors. But that's another story. If I remember, I'll come back to it. If I don't, then I won't. Anyway, I think it was Bulova, but I can't really remember for sure. So they attached the watch to the propeller of an outboard motor and stuck the outboard motor in a barrel, and then turned on the outboard motor. You were supposed to believe, and I think they probably didn't lie about this, that the outboard motor that they stuck in the barrel was actually the one with the watch on it. And then they ran it for like 10 seconds or, 5 seconds. It wasn't a long time. But I guess if you were a watch being submerged in water, being spun around on the propeller of an outboard motor, it would feel like a long time. Come out, say, it's still ticking. We couldn't hear it. There was manipulation going on in those commercials or not, but it was pretty cool that you could abuse a watch that way and it would still run. But we didn't care about those things, care if a watch was a Rolex or a Tag Heuer, or we didn't even know what those things were. We'd never heard of those words, much less knew that they were watch brands. But the status thing with watches was how many jewels did it have? Because I remember sometime in grade school and elementary school learning. I mean, we all, for some reason, learned at the same time. It just became a thing to know about that watches have jewels. And maybe it was because of commercials or TV or something that talked about 13 jewel Bulova or whatever, however many jewels this thing had. But suddenly having jewels in your watch became a thing. It became an important thing to have jewels in your watch. We didn't know why. We didn't know what the jewels did. Because we were like, in 5th grade or something, right? But what we did know was in this same simplistic way as transistors in a radio, if you have more must be better. So if your watch had like 9 jewels, my watch had like 9 jewels, and your watch had, 13 jewels, obviously that must be better, because there were more jewels, and jewels are good, expensive things to have. Jewels are a thing that you want, and if you've got one, I missed a spot down here. 2 jewels are better than 1 jewel, right? So obviously 13 jewels in a watch would be better than 9. And as I said, we really had no clue what these jewels did. We just knew that there were jewels in the watch. So that had to be something. And if you're going to have a jewel, you might as well have a lot of jewels. So just like comparing the number of transistors in your radio, we would compare the number of jewels in our watches. I don't think people really talk about that much anymore. It's not maybe a big deal. Well, a lot of them don't have mechanical mechanisms anymore. They're run off of a battery. They're electronic, and so they're still moving the parts to move the hands and stuff. So eventually I found out why there were even jewels in the watch to begin with. And what they were. What they were synthetic rubies. Synthetic rubies suddenly became a big, a deal because they're really very hard. They're basically corundum, which is what on the Mohs scale, I think that's what it's called, is a 9. So as a 9 out of 10, they're just short of being diamond hard, which is pretty hard. And inside a wristwatch, there are these little bearings where stuff is moving. One part is rubbing against another, and those places are bearings because they bear weight or they bear friction of some sort. I'm going to paint that color later. I'm going to paint this color first. I've got these bits here that I want to be darker than the rest. It doesn't have to be a real huge difference in... what am I doing? No, I can't do it that way because... Sorry. I usually like to paint the upper surfaces and then paint down to them on the lower surfaces, but I can't really do that in this case because paint has to get down in these little bitty areas here. So I'm going to paint down to them. Anyway, I can go back and forth between the two colors until it's settled. I'll probably end up doing that. So I'm painting this section next before I paint the parachute cords, because the parachute cords get painted over that other brown, and I want that to dry, or at least be mostly dry. But just lumps of dried paint getting in the cap and getting in the way. So the main purpose of in terms of volume at least, of this is different enough. I'm not happy with how that's going because for two reasons. One is the texture isn't working right, but it's too dark. I want these to be dark. I want this part underneath to be light. So I'm going to pick one of the other metallics. I'm either going to use regular aluminum or maybe the aluminum. It's much lighter. I'm just going to use this not so much because I like the color, but I want the contrast. I want the color contrast. There isn't too much of it, and it'll only be seen when this sort of comes apart. I'm hoping this isn't too light. Find out, won't I? Let that be. Hopefully it will dry by the time I get around to it. And start up here. Is this not going to cover for me? Is it going to misbehave? It's just not mixed. This should have been really simple, like stupid simple, right? And it's not because of the paint. Too thin. I think the color is about right. It's really light. I think that's pretty decent if I can get it to work. But it's just been sitting for so long that all the little metal flake stuff in it is not suspended in the solvent. So anyway, synthetic rubies are made for lasers. Synthetic rubies were made, and then they were used in lasers. Some of the first lasers used the synthetic rubies as the medium, but because they were very hard, they didn't wear out, and they could be polished to a really precise surface, right? Like flat surface, and so they made really good bearings at a very tiny scale, and so they were used as bearings for the internal components of watches, and that's why you would have jewels in a watch, because the moving parts, all the little rotating, oscillating, interesting little bits of the watch are suspended on these synthetic ruby bearings. And that's why there were jewels, and the number of jewels was the number of bearings. Not all of them necessarily were made with a jewel, but the number of jewels was the number of bearings that were used in the watch. So I suppose in some ways, it could be argued, yes, indeed, the number of jewels did make a difference in like the quality of the watch, because if more bearings were jeweled bearings as opposed to just, say, stainless steel or something like that, then there would be more better bearings. But then the number of jewels would also depend on the number of bearings that were in the watch. Say there were only 8 of them. No, probably not that few, but say there were 9 bearings in the watch and they all were jeweled, you'd have a 9 jeweled watch, and it would be dumb. Let's say dumb. It would be pointless. It'd be pointless to have like 11 jewels in a watch that had 9 bearings, because what would those jewels be doing? Just be sitting around so that 12-year-olds were comparing their watches during recess. They could say, "Oh, mine has 11 jewels instead of 9 jewels, even if it only had 9 bearings," right? Anyway, that is the kind of thing that happened in grade schools in the this would be the early 1960s. So, if you missed it, that's what you were missing. Okay, that was a better choice of color. Pick the lighter one. It contrasts with the frame color a little better. Mm. Even though this might have a slightly uneven surface, I'm going to use this for these components rather than the metallic color, because the pigment doesn't seem to be suspending in them very well. All right, what needs to be done on here yet? I'll just go over this is what needs to be done. These components need to be painted darker. These bits I'm going to claim are the mortars that pull out the parachutes. Okay. And then all through here, in various and sundry places, are parachute cords. These are pretty obviously cords that connect to the explosive, the mortar that pulls the whole thing out. Those are clear. And for some reason, there's some that are wrapped around the top. Assuming those are parachute cords, I'm going to paint them that way, as opposed to some sort of mechanical thing that wraps around. Would it be? Could these be like? Now that I'm looking at it, they go here and then down into this section, and then here up to here. I am now guessing that those are some sort of like hydraulic line or whatever. I'm going to paint those really dark gray, because I'm going to claim, I'm saying those are hydraulic lines. I'm actually going to use dark gray paint. It's called dark gray. Oh, I just stopped paying attention. Hi. What did you get? Goda. Okay. Oh, is it Audi? Nice platform. So it's a full electric car. Oh, great. As winter hits, I want to get updates. Okay, can you promise to do that? Because here in Michigan, it's not unusual. I mean, it's less unusual. It's less usual now than it used to be. But on the Fahrenheit scale, I'm not sure what it is on centigrade, but it's probably pretty low. We get down to like 10 below zero. And zero here, our freezing point is 32, not zero. So there's many negative centigrade numbers here, or Celsius numbers, to get to 10 below. And there is a concern, this is a concern I have, is that, say it's that cold, And, you charge the car up and the battery's all charged and all that's wonderful. But then it's parked outside for maybe several hours, maybe an entire day, if you're at work or something. Will the battery still have a very good charge at that very cold temperature? And so my major worry about electric cars, and I would like to have one sometime, is not so much like the range. Does it go 250 miles or does it go 300 miles on a charge? That certainly is an issue because of the distances here. But a bigger issue is how will it operate when the temperatures are really that cold? I'll ask that. I had an experience once. That's pretty, yeah. We would install a charger here at home in our garage, but I have no idea where the next superchargers would be. Our infrastructure here in the States, I think, is determined. It's not that well supported, I'll say, by the government in terms of charging stations. So most of our trips would be, fairly short range. I'm looking at probably 40 miles, maybe 50. Because the distances here are, just to get to some things, are a little long. So doing that kind of round trip, I don't think would be, for the most part, of concern. But I'll just say this: my brother, electric powered yard equipment, snow blowers, chainsaws, that kind of stuff, relatively new. And my brother got one of the first electric battery-powered snow blowers. He lives in northern Wisconsin, and the battery charger was in the garage. Okay, this is a long way of getting to the point. So it has a heat pump, so it's drawing on the battery, but also charging at the same time. And just gumming up the tip of the brush right away. And I'll finish my story and it will express my concern. So the battery charger, and it was just a small battery, two of them for the snowblower, right? But it was on the Fahrenheit scale, right? 30 below zero. It was bitterly cold. And the battery wouldn't charge. I mean, it simply would not take a charge at that temperature. So we had to pull the charger and the battery into the house inside. Not that that's a bad thing. Yeah, I can see that the heater would have to be absolutely essential. But yeah, this battery wouldn't take a charge in the garage at that temperature. It just would not charge up. it charged up fine when we brought it indoors, and it actually ran okay at that temperature. Once I was out there blowing snow with it, for some reason I got volunteered to do that in that temperature. Doesn't seem fair now, but I did. But after that experience, it was what if we had this car and we're trying to charge it and it were 10, 15 degrees below zero? Would the battery charge at all? Well, thank you for sharing that. And as the winter goes along, I want to hear about your experience with your electric car, because it's getting close to being the time when we should consider getting one here. 2x magnifier is not perfect, but without it, it looks okay. And cables look okay. So I'm pretty sure I'm painting this correctly, that these need to be dark like this, because they are some sort of like power cable or hydraulic cable or something, and not just not a parachute cable. Thanks for joining in, Ole, and yeah, keep us informed about your experience with your new car. And if anybody knows that if your electric car, you say you drove it to work and you didn't have a heated garage, because most employers do not have heated garages for their employees. Sat outside in the parking lot for like 9 hours, and it was 0 or 10 below 0 Fahrenheit. Would it work? That is, in our part of the country, that is a real concern. And I don't know. I really don't know, and I haven't. I suppose I should look and see if there are those kind of test results. But then, electric cars have become really popular in the Scandinavian countries, and their winters are not known for being tropical. So there might be a fair amount of experience by now about how that will go. Doing painting. I'm actually doing painting on the streaming today. Say that with a little bit of surprise, because it is the truth that there isn't always a lot of, if any, painting on some of these streams with this particular model. But with this section of it, I have the opportunity to do some detail painting. They're probably painting detail that doesn't even exist. But I think it looks good doing this. They are acting as these particular lines are. like some sort of power cable, like hydraulic line, a parachute cord. Doesn't make sense that they would be parachute cord. That's why I'm painting in this color, because it's just really what I do. Put my finger in it, of course. I've got this holder here so that I don't touch the painted surfaces, and then I just stick a finger in anyway. Too bad. Shows the split there. I don't have too much touching up to do on this. This line a little bit higher to match the rest of it. All right. I think like the white aluminium color is dry enough. I mean, I still got a lot of time left to get out the gunmetal and paint these 3 bits. The brown is drying more slowly. Using that, I'm not using that. I do need this. I'm picking out the colors I'm using here. So this is kind of coming along. It's not bad. Not bad in terms of coming alongness. This paint's a lot more viscous. It's thicker than the paint that I used here. And so it's possible that it will show more brush marks. But it's the color I want. Color-wise, it looks okay. Precision of the boundary line is important. But one thing I've learned is that the right location of it sometimes is a little less important than whether it's straight or not. Similarities that way are usually very obvious. Some bubbles. Okay, there's one. Do this. I'm going to paint down onto the surface below. That's going to be painted red because it's an explosive thing. Afraid I went a little high there, but it looks okay. Yeah, that line, I don't know, I might need to come back with the lighter silver and clean it up. See how it looks later. Or it might be okay. Down here at the bottom. Oh yeah. That was an oops. That was really bad. I mean, I have to actually try to clean that off because it's going to leave a lump. Okay, I'm going to have to paint that over, but brush. I wasn't careful, and the brush just kept going. It was careless. Paid for the carelessness there. Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to think. As I'm talking about socioeconomic level, the status of watches, 7th grade level, was based on the number of jewels it claimed to have. In our naive belief, not totally unjustified, but still naive belief that the number of jewels somehow made a big difference in the bragging rights status of the watch owner. And in some ways it was just it was naive in that we didn't know why there were jewels in the watch. We didn't know that maybe a watch with fewer jewels just simply had fewer pivot points, bearings that would justify using a jewel. Not knowing those things, we just simply based it on the number of jewels. And of course, having a lot of jewels is better than having fewer jewels. It was our level of understanding. And our level of understanding with regard to the number of transistors in our transistor radio was even more naive and kind of misguided, but it's what we knew. It's good. How's the time going? Too bad, not too bad. I'm going to get an even finer brush out. I'm finding that this is just not perfect. I am going to, before I forget, get back to this white aluminium. Let's hope I'm not making a mistake here, but I want to cover up my error. Okay, so there. The parts that are white are going to be painted red. Otherwise, I think that came out okay. I'm not sure if the detail is at all historically appropriate because it's hard to tell with this model what is and what isn't. But at least, since it's put there, might as well show it. I'm going to use a much lighter color for the parachute lines. There aren't very many of them. There's just one on each of these that seems to be connected from the top of the parachute to the explosive device that releases the parachute. And I'm using a pretty light color, mainly just for contrast, because it's going to be shaded with the wash that I'm going to be putting on this brown. This brown is pretty dull, but if I put a brown wash on it, all the detail, the folds and everything will show pretty nicely. And I think it will turn out okay. So this on camera. I hope it's on camera. This is one of the what I am claiming to be parachute cord. Same sort of thing seems to be present in all three of them. And it's related to this device here. I'm sure that was the intent of this. Now you can at least see it. You can see that it's there. A bit too far there. The paint ran. I'll have to touch that up. So for some reason, it runs up a little higher than the others did. Yeah. Now, before I do any shading, do some touch up with the brown, the darker brown, because I've got some spots there, and there's one over there too. That should be, hoping, should be just pretty easy to do. No, when I do it. Yeah, it's the post break. It's getting a little chilly down here. Getting drainage from it. A little bit of car. We can do that with this without those magnifiers. Not only making it bigger, but also a supplemental light makes a huge difference. Yeah, I've got some edge repair. Fair amount of edge repair here, but that'll be It'd be too hard to do. Let's see where the third one goes. So there you kind of. Okay. So what else? What else? Status C. Almost right. All status C erroneously depends on there being more of. Pizza. Wow, that's really nice. That was good. You ended up using larger brushes? Are you just painting larger areas? Or you or is your skill level increasing? I'm finding myself using smaller and smaller brushes. My skill level is not increasing. Wow, this edge, I was doing okay, but this edge looks really ragged now that I'm looking at it. I don't know if the paint was running. Oh well, it's like I said, this will be a fairly easy fix. The point is the point. Okay, the larger brushes, if they hold more paint, as long as it flows nicely to the point. Yeah, that makes sense. That if the point like this has a tiny point, right? But if there was a larger brush that came to that point and the point held up and didn't like splay out, having more paint in the brush with the capillary action means that you can paint, like if you're painting a line, right, along here, you could just do it in one nice smooth stroke as opposed to maybe 3 or 4 because the paint ran out along the way. And each time one lifts the brush, I've discovered this, there's always the chance of the line becoming uneven. Okay, that makes sense. I have one. I haven't used it. Maybe I should try. Where did it go? Oh yeah, I just bought this one. It's you can compare it to this. The point, if the point stays pointy, is about the same as the bitty brush there, but because it's so much bigger, it might hold the paint better. Like I said, I haven't tried this yet. Why not? I don't know. It's something new. And trying something new is frightening. Yeah, that would, for something like this, I mean, to just be able to go across the whole thing with just one application of paint that would actually be really much better. So I'm going to have to give this a go sometime. Maybe the next time I'm doing minifigs, I'll give this a try. I don't remember where or how I got this one. It's a Tamiya one. Maybe it might have come along with. Okay, make sure the brush is damp before doing that. And then the paint should come up like about halfway. Yeah, you don't want it all the way up to the top. It'll just get on my fingers and everything else. I think this might have come when I ordered a bunch of paints. They might have sent this along with it. But it looked like an interesting brush. I'll have to give it a try. Let's see. I think I can paint the red on here now. And then after painting the red, I'm going to do touch up on the parachute cords, and I decided I'm not going to do the wash today. That's just, I would just be pushing a little too hard. Drive carefully picking up your son. I hope he had a good practice. So does he play just one position? Or does he play multiple positions? And just sort of test things out. Well, I have to say that when I painted things like walls, as opposed to models, actually even minifigs, that having more paint on the brush does make it easier. But I'd never tested, a bigger brush with a fine point. It was one of those things I would just complain about. But it makes sense to give that a try, and I think I will. If it works, then I know what to order. It hasn't really been much of an issue on this model because this is like the only detail that I've been painting on the whole thing, other than maybe some of the bits on the astronaut figures. The fine point is critical, though, to get to these little bitty spots, where the paint needs to go. No, I found that really to be, okay. Midfielder and attack, that's, I bet he is in excellent condition. I really found that, especially with some of the paints that are kind of viscous to begin with, is that what you end up with is a little blob of dry paint on the tip of the brush, which is why, as I've been painting this, you see me wiping off the brush fairly often, is that the paint would dry on the tip of the brush, and then, it doesn't do any good. Okay, well, have a safe drive, and I will see you hopefully on Friday, where I will continue doing miscellaneous stuff on this, and getting it just about as far as I can get it before I have to work on the control panels. But thanks for joining in. It was good to have a chat today, too. The advice about the brushes makes a lot of sense. I've been using this quite a lot for detail because it has such a nice fine point. But now that I've got a brush that I can try, it also has a fine point but can hold more paint, I'm definitely going to give that a go. I'm painting these red because my belief is that these represent the mortars. That's what they're called, a little explosive device that actually releases the parachute. Poof, and pulls the cord. The cord will pull the parachute away from its resting point here. At least that's the story I'm making up to explain why I'm painting them red. The painting directions give really no clue. There's really no help. The painting directions just said paint this entire thing brown. That's it. Just brown. Which would just look really not very good. Inadequate. These are larger. I don't know why. It's just the way the model's built. I do believe one of these is for the pilot chute, which is the first thing that goes out. And its function is to stabilize the capsule after it has entered the atmosphere and slowed down enough so that the tiny pilot chute can be safely deployed. And the other one is for what's called a drogue chute. Drogue chute's purpose, usually in a parachute system, is to help pull the main parachute out of its pack and assist it in inflating. So one is for one and one is for the other. That sort of is fairly consistent with the picture I got of this compartment that I'd printed out, just to give some idea of what the components were here. I should be finishing this, yeah, just about the right time. See, they're actually different sizes, so that kind of makes sense. Just a spot there. I'm going to have to come back and touch that up like right away, or else I'm going to forget about it. Yeah, another secret is keep rotating the work. You have to keep rotating the work because what can look just fine from one direction or angle doesn't necessarily look the same from another. And what I'm seeing here is that I missed an entire spot when I was painting with the gunmetal. A big enough spot to be a pretty big spot. I'm going to have to touch that up. And I am going to do that, even though there's a little bit of a danger of getting the one paint onto the other while it's still wet. Being impatient as I am at the moment, but being impatient, I will do this anyway. Otherwise, it's the kind of thing that could just be overlooked. It looks to me like the major touch-up is with the cork brown, mainly around the edges of some of these parachute cord lines, where the lighter color just sort of ran. And I'm going to save that for Friday. Just put the paint out here. I'm going to cover this up. And I've got a little bit of touch-up to do with this color around the edges and the top. So I'll be using these paints. I'm going to take it off of here so I can cover it up with a paper towel. just like that, so that it doesn't get dirty between now and then. The wet paint could accumulate dust. So thanks for joining in. Remember, Dice and Dungeons, Dungeons and Dragons show with a live chat streaming on Sundays at 2, where you can catch all the old episodes on YouTube. Okay? If you like what you're seeing here or elsewhere, if you're watching it on Twitch, you can become a follower. Encourage everybody you know, anybody you run into that you don't know, to whom you introduce yourself, whatever, that they should become followers. On YouTube, I think they're called subscribers. Be one of those. And if you really like it, you can go to patreon.com/diceanddungeons, patreon.com/diceanddungeons, and become a patron. You can get access to our improv warm-up sessions and our new feature, Hot Takes and Cold Reads, where we give a prompt to artificial intelligence, read the result, and usually it's kind of funny. So thanks everybody for joining in. I will be back on Friday, finishing up this parachute bit. Okay, I'll be finishing that, and then what else is there? I mean, until I get the appliques for the control panels, there's not much more I can do on this, except that I might start painting the moon surface. I'm going to prime this. These guys are going to get primed and painted, base coated, so that they're ready for the appliques. I'm going to finish that. Then I'll look in the box to see if I missed anything, because I might have. And then, depending on how things go, I might start beginning to look at what it takes to build a Savoia. So thanks, everybody. Unless you want to watch me file down the edges before I prime this, which would be really kind of pointless, I will see you all on Friday at more or less 10. So thanks again. See you then.